I stood at the edge of the open grave, the wind clawing at my black dress. The cemetery smelled of cut grass mixed with damp earth, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang as if mocking me. My daughter's coffin looked too small, too cruel, too final. 9 years of laughter, bedtime stories, peanut butter sandwiches packed with love, all sealed in a box the color of storm clouds. I clutched the folded program in my hands until the paper wrinkled like old skin. Around me, a handful of neighbors and coworkers bowed their heads. But the seats in the front row, reserved for family, stayed empty. No mother. No father. No sister. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to discover what happened when I finally confronted them. As the pastor's voice droned on about comfort and eternal rest, I caught the faint ding of my phone inside my purse. Later, I would open it and see their faces, my family, smiling under the Florida sun. My mother in a wide-brimmed hat, holding a margarita. My father, red-nosed and shirtless by the pool. My sister posing in a white bikini with her fiancé. While I buried my child alone, they were sipping cocktails and posting captions about living life to the fullest. The betrayal didn't stab me all at once. It sank in slowly, like a frost creeping across a windowpane, chilling me from the inside out. I whispered my final goodbye, dropped a single rose on the casket, and listened to it bounce against the wood. That hollow sound was the loneliest music I had ever heard. Later that night, as I sat in the silence of my living room, the smell of lilies still clinging to my coat, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "Stop being dramatic. This is urgent." I froze. Urgent? She hadn't come to her granddaughter's funeral, and now she had the nerve to demand something? My hands shook as I opened the message, and my heart dropped when I read the words. She was talking about my dead daughter's trust fund. And that was only the beginning. Long before the funeral, the cracks were already there. My family had a way of making me feel like a guest in my own bloodline. We grew up in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. A house with pale yellow siding, a porch swing that always creaked, and hydrangeas my mother clipped obsessively every summer. From the outside, we looked like the picture of suburban grace. Inside, it was all performance, polished smiles hiding judgment sharp enough to cut glass. My mother, Elaine, was the queen of appearances. Her perfume always arrived in a room before she did, sharp, cloying, like the roses she never let us touch in the garden. My father, Charles, had retired early from the post office, but he walked around like he was the mayor of the neighborhood, shaking hands and puffing out his chest. And then there was my sister, Caroline. Blonde, bubbly, always the chosen one. If she breathed, my parents applauded. If I succeeded, they yawned. When I got pregnant at 26, fresh out of college and freshly divorced from a man who didn't deserve to be called a father, my parents didn't hug me. They held a meeting. My mother crossed her arms and said, "Don't expect us to raise your mistakes." Caroline, smirking beside her, added, "You always wanted attention, didn't you?" That was the moment I understood. My daughter, Lily, and I would be on our own. And yet I didn't mind. Lily was my reason to keep breathing. Her laughter filled the empty spaces. Her tiny hand fit perfectly in mine. When she was born, I swore she'd never feel the cold distance I grew up with. But my parents never softened. They sent birthday gifts late, if at all. They called Lily your child as if she was separate from the family tree. Once, at Thanksgiving, Caroline suggested we eat in the dining room while Lily watched cartoons in the den. I remember the porcelain turkey centerpiece sitting between us, and the way it looked like a barrier I couldn't cross. And yet, after years of being ignored, they still found a way to need me. They always did. That night, staring at my mother's text about the trust fund, I realized something chilling. My parents weren't just heartless. They were hunters, circling grief like vultures, waiting for the moment to take what was never theirs. But they had no idea I was done playing prey. The day after the funeral, the house smelled like wilted flowers. Bouquets leaned in vases like tired soldiers, their petals browning at the edges. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of unopened sympathy cards. The silence pressed against my chest until the phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice came through sharp and brisk, like the snap of scissors cutting fabric. You've had your time to grieve, Anna. Now, we need to talk about the trust fund. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. The what? Don't play dumb, she snapped. The money Lily's father left behind. $750,000. We need it for Caroline's wedding. Do you want your sister walking down the aisle in shame? People will talk, Anna. Don't be selfish. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind raced back to the hospital room when Lily was born, how I'd signed those papers with shaking hands, promising her future would be safe, no matter what. That trust fund was her shield, her inheritance, her piece of security in a world that had already taken too much from her. And now my mother wanted to funnel it into champagne fountains and rented chandeliers? I tried to steady my voice. That money was for Lily's life, not for Caroline's wedding decorations. My mother sighed, the kind of sigh that always carried disappointment. You've always been dramatic. Lily's gone. Caroline's still here. Do the right thing for once. I hung up before she could finish. The sound of the dial tone echoed in my ears, but it wasn't silence, it was a war drum. I stared at the porcelain music box on the counter, the one Lily used to wind every night before bed. I twisted the key until it played its fragile, tinkling tune, and I whispered into the empty room, "Don't worry, baby. They'll never touch what's yours." And yet, deep down, I knew this was just their opening move. The real fight hadn't even begun. It didn't take long for my mother's words to turn into action. 3 days after the funeral, while the lilies on my doorstep had begun to rot and sag, I heard the knock. It was sharp, deliberate, like someone announcing not a visit, but a takeover. I opened the door and there they were. My parents, dressed in matching polos as if they'd come from a golf outing, and Caroline, shimmering in white like a bride before the dress. She wore a grin that belonged more at a bridal shower than at the home of her grieving sister. Caroline pushed past me first. "We just need to talk numbers, Anna. You're dragging this out." Her perfume filled the air, sweet, sticky, suffocating, like syrup poured over spoiled fruit. I stood frozen in the doorway as my father brushed past me next, his shoes squeaking on the hardwood floor Lily had once danced across in socked feet. My mother lingered behind, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We didn't come here to fight," she said, her tone falsely calm. "We came here to be reasonable. Caroline's wedding is weeks away, and there's no time for delays." Caroline set a binder down on the table, white leather, gold edges, like she was a lawyer about to close a deal. She flipped it open, revealing lists of venues, florists, and prices scrawled in perfect handwriting. "It's not just about me," she said. "It's about family reputation. This wedding is going to put us back where we belong. But we need the trust fund to make it happen." I stared at her, my throat tight. Lily's drawings still decorated the refrigerator behind her. Crayon suns and stick figure hearts, silent witnesses to the betrayal unfolding in my kitchen. "You can't be serious," I whispered. That money was Lily's future. Caroline rolled her eyes. "She doesn't have a future anymore." Her words cracked across the room like thunder, and for a moment, the air itself felt heavier. My knees wobbled, but I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. I realized then, this wasn't just greed. This was erasure. They wanted to erase my daughter, fold her trust into champagne towers, and pretend she never existed. And I knew, with a cold certainty, that if I didn't fight back, they would succeed. The room felt smaller with them inside it, as though the walls were bending inward, trapping me. Caroline spread out her binder across my kitchen table, flipping through pages of vendors and receipts like it was a sacred scripture. My father tapped the table impatiently, the way he used to when I was a kid being scolded for talking back. And my mother just stood there, calm, her eyes glittering like polished stones. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, each second louder than the last. It felt like the house itself was waiting, holding its breath for what I would do. Finally, I found my voice. "Get out." Caroline looked up, laughing as though I'd cracked a joke. "You don't get to tell us that, Anna. We're family. Family share. Family sacrifice." She leaned forward, her manicured nails clicking against the binder. "Lily's trust fund can save us all. Don't be selfish. Something inside me snapped. The grief I had carried so quietly since the funeral burned into something sharper, something that tasted like iron in my mouth. I walked to the refrigerator, ripped down one of Lily's drawings, a crooked rainbow with our name scrawled underneath, and slammed it onto the table between us. She's not a number. She's not your lifeline. She was my daughter. And you will not touch what's hers. The room went silent. My father's face reddened, his jaw tightening like it had when he used to hold back his temper. My mother exhaled, slow and deliberate, as if she were trying to keep control of the scene. But Caroline was the one who broke it. Then you'll regret this, she hissed, snapping her binder shut. Her perfume clung to the air as she stood. You've always been the failure of this family. Don't make Lily's memory another one. They filed out one by one, leaving the door ajar. The evening air rushed in, cold against my skin, carrying with it the faint smell of burning leaves. I shut the door and leaned against it, my whole body shaking. I knew they weren't finished. Families like mine didn't retreat, they regrouped. And I would need more than anger to protect what was left of my daughter's legacy. That night, I made a call. Not to them, but to someone who had been waiting for me to finally stand my ground. Someone who knew the law better than my parents knew cruelty. By the end of the week, I felt the shift in the air. Small towns carry secrets like pollen, floating from porch to porch until everyone's breathing it in. My neighbors no longer waved the same way. At the grocery store, I caught whispers floating just behind my back, fragments of sentences I wasn't supposed to hear. She's sitting on a fortune. Wouldn't even help her own sister. Some people are just bitter. The first sting came at church on Sunday. Mrs. Evans, who had once brought Lily a birthday cake shaped like a pony, leaned close to me during the hymn and whispered, "Family is everything, Anna. Don't let pride ruin you." Her words carried the sour tang of my mother's perfume, as though she'd been spoon-fed the line. That's when I realized my parents and Caroline weren't waiting for lawyers. They were using the oldest weapon in the book, shame. They knew reputation mattered here, that a woman already labeled divorced, single mother, tragic case could be painted into any corner they wanted. By Monday, Caroline posted a long, tearful Facebook status about a sister refusing to help in a time of joy and need. The comments flooded in, full of sympathy for her. Pictures of her in bridal boutiques, captions about sacrifice and family first, all while I sat in my kitchen surrounded by unopened bills and Lily's silent toys. I wanted to scream, but instead, I went back to the music box. Its tune felt smaller now, almost drowned out by the noise of their lies. Still, it reminded me, Lily deserved better than silence. So I picked up the phone and dialed the lawyer I'd contacted after they stormed out of my house. His voice was steady, calm, like an anchor against the storm. "Anna," he said, "if what you're telling me is true, you're not just dealing with greed. You're dealing with fraud, coercion, and possibly theft. But you need to decide, are you ready to fight this in the open?" I looked at Lily's rainbow drawing, taped back onto the refrigerator with shaky hands. My grief had become armor. My fear, a weapon. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm ready." But I had no idea just how ruthless my family was about to become. It happened at the diner on Main Street, the kind of place where everyone knows your order before you sit down. I'd gone there for a late breakfast, needing a moment away from the silence of my house. The smell of bacon and coffee clung to the air, a comfort I hadn't felt in weeks. I was halfway through my eggs when the bell above the door jingled. Caroline swept in like she owned the place, her hair curled into soft waves, her white coat spotless. Conversations dimmed the moment she entered, as if the entire diner had been waiting for this scene. She spotted me instantly and walked over, her heels clicking against the tile. I could feel every pair of eyes turning to follow her. "Well, if it isn't the grieving widow," she said sweetly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Or should I say, the greedy widow? I froze, fork in hand. A low murmur rolled through the room. Caroline leaned in, her perfume heavy, sugary sick, filling the space between us. "People should know the truth, Anna. You're hoarding Lily's trust fund while the rest of us are trying to keep this family together. Do you really think money locked away in some account honors her memory?" I swallowed hard, the diner spinning around me. She wanted a scene. She wanted witnesses. And judging by the nods and whispers, she already had them. I set my fork down and met her eyes. That money is for Lily. It always was. You don't get to decide what her memory is worth. Caroline tilted her head, smirking, then raised her voice. So you'd rather let it rot in a bank than help your sister walk down the aisle with dignity? Selfish as always. The words hit harder than any slap. Not because they were true, but because I could see the crowd believing them. Faces I'd known since childhood looked at me differently now, pity mixed with judgment, like I was some villain in my own story. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, but instead I stood, my hands trembling as I threw a few bills on the counter. The music box melody echoed in my head, a reminder to stay steady, stay calm. As I walked out, Caroline called after me, her voice sweet as poison. See you in court, sis. And in that moment, I knew this battle wasn't going to stay behind closed doors. My family was ready to drag me through the mud in front of the entire town. Before we ever stepped into a courtroom, my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, asked me to bring him every document I had tied to Lily's trust. I remember sitting at my dining table late into the night, papers spread around me like scattered feathers. The lamp cast a pale glow over bank statements, signatures, notarized contracts, the dry bones of a promise meant to protect my daughter's future. When I slid the folder across his desk the next morning, his eyes sharpened the moment he flipped through the first pages. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Anna," he said slowly, "do you realize what's in here?" I frowned. It's just the paperwork from when Lily's father passed. The insurance money, the trust account. Nothing special. But Harrison shook his head. This isn't just insurance. This is tied to his company pension. A survivor's fund. And by law, it doesn't belong to your parents or your sister. It's protected. They can't touch it. For a moment, relief washed over me. A fragile kind of hope. But then his tone darkened. "There's something else," he continued, flipping to the back. "Your father, he signed as a secondary guardian when the fund was created. Did you know that?" I felt the air leave my lungs. No, I hadn't known. I remembered my father showing up at the hospital when Lily was born, papers in hand, telling me it was just routine. I was too exhausted, too young, too trusting to question him. Harrison's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "This complicates things. Legally, he has no claim now that Lily has passed. But he'll use this signature as leverage, as proof he was involved from the beginning. If this goes public, it'll get messy. Very messy." I thought of my father, standing in my kitchen days ago, his face flushed with entitlement. He knew about this signature all along. That's why they were so confident. That's why they believed they could bend me into surrender. I left Harrison's office with the folder pressed to my chest, the papers inside suddenly heavier, as though they carried not just numbers, but chains. The sun outside was too bright, the air too sharp, and as I walked to my car, a chilling realization set in. My parents weren't just greedy. They had planted their hands into Lily's life before she could even walk. And if I wasn't careful, they would twist her memory into something I wouldn't even recognize. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. The walls were painted the color of sand, neutral and unforgiving, as if they'd been designed to strip people down to their bare truths. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Mr. Harrison, my palms damp against the cool surface, while my parents and Caroline paraded in on the other side. Caroline wore ivory again, like she was walking a runway instead of entering a courtroom. My mother's face was set in stone, lips painted the color of dried roses. My father leaned back in his chair, arms folded, projecting the false confidence of a man who believed the town already belonged to him. When the judge entered, the air shifted. Conversations died. Papers rustled. My heart thudded against my ribs like a trapped bird. Harrison opened with steady precision, laying out the facts, the fund created from Lily's father's pension, the binding clause that safeguarded it, the law that recognized it as untouchable. His words were calm, surgical, leaving no room for sentiment, just the sharp cut of truth. Then it was my father's turn. He stood, pulling from his jacket the document I dreaded, the page bearing his signature as secondary guardian. He held it up like it was a crown jewel. "Your Honor," he said, his voice booming, "my daughter is grieving and grief clouds judgment. This fund was always meant for family security. I signed as guardian because I cared about that child. And now, Caroline's wedding is the future of this family. That money should serve the living, not gather dust." His words spread across the room like poison, seeping into the ears of the spectators behind us. I felt their stares burning the back of my neck, judgment already forming. Harrison stood calmly. "With respect, Your Honor, the law is not a family heirloom to be passed around at will. Mr. Turner's signature may have once given him access, but the child is deceased. That access expired with her life. The fund belongs to Anna legally and morally." The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "This case isn't about sentiment. It's about law. But I'll say this. Dragging a grieving mother into court over her dead child's trust is not something this bench looks kindly upon." A murmur rippled through the room. My father's jaw tightened. Caroline shifted in her seat, her smile faltering. For the first time since Lily's death, I felt the faintest flicker of power return to me, not a roaring fire, but a spark. Enough to remind me I wasn't defenseless. But as we left the courtroom, my mother brushed past me, her voice low enough only I could hear. "This isn't over, Anna. You'll regret standing against us." Her perfume lingered as she walked away, leaving me with the chilling certainty that the worst was still ahead. I sat in that courtroom, barely breathing, as the judge shuffled his papers. My hands trembled in my lap, but my face stayed still. I didn't want them, my parents, my sister, or anyone else, to see me shake. My lawyer had spoken last, his words still echoing in my ears. "This case isn't about money. It's about respect, for a grieving mother, for her daughter's memory, and for the law." I clung to that sentence like it was a rope keeping me from drowning. Across the aisle, my parents looked annoyed, as if this trial was just another inconvenience they had to get through before dinner reservations. My father's fingers tapped on the bench, my mother's eyes were cold and evasive. My sister? She was scrolling through her phone, probably texting about her stressful day in court. When the judge finally spoke, my heart nearly stopped. "In the matter of Thompson family versus Anna Thompson," he began, his voice steady, "this court finds that the trust fund belongs solely to the named guardian, Anna Thompson, and cannot be diverted for other purposes. The claims made by the plaintiffs, her parents, are dismissed." I won. But I didn't cheer, I didn't cry, I didn't even move. I just closed my eyes for 1 second and whispered in my head, "Thank you." This wasn't joy. This was something quieter, heavier, but purer. Peace. I thought it was over until my sister suddenly stood up. "Wait," she blurted. Her voice cracked, but it was loud enough that every head turned. "I need to say something." My stomach dropped. She gripped her phone like it was glued to her hand, her knuckles pale. She looked at the judge, then at the room, and finally at me. "Mom and Dad didn't just want the money for my wedding," she said, her words trembling. "They wanted it to pay off their debts. Gambling debts. Dad owes people who don't forgive easily." The courtroom gasped. I felt the blood drain from my face. My father's face turned crimson. My mother lunged to hush her, but it was too late. The truth was out, and it hung in the air like a crack in glass no one could ever fix. The judge slammed his gavel. "This court is adjourned." Chaos broke out, whispers, journalists scribbling, cameras clicking, but I sat frozen, my chest hollow. I had won my daughter's trust back. I had fought for her memory, and I had prevailed. But in that same moment, the last fragile pieces of my family shattered in front of me. As I stood to leave, my mother's eyes locked onto mine, burning with rage, not remorse. My father wouldn't even look at me. And my sister? She was crying, but I couldn't tell if her tears were for me or for the family she had just exposed. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt two things at once, light because I had honored my daughter, and unbearably heavy because the people who raised me had betrayed me in ways I still couldn't fully grasp. But in that silence, as I stepped outside into the sunlight, I whispered to my daughter, "We won, sweetheart." Quietly. Strongly. They'll never understand what winning really means.